Okay.
That week, I knew that God was real and that He loved me, and I'd never be alone.
Coming out of the water, I was different.
This is my story.
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 This is my story. My name's Ryan. I go to the 10:30 service because I don't do early mornings. I work in the sound booth a lot, so people might see me up there. I think people know me by the guy with all the hair, or the guy that's in black with all the hair. I have the cancer support group that I work on, and I'm on the safety and security team. Diane Hedden. We actually work together at the firehouse. We're both vendors there, antique vendors or whatever. One of the things that I was doing for a while was buy-sell business, and so I met her there. She's obviously really nice. Everybody knows that here. She's a really, really nice person. And I don't know how it happened, but it had been something that I knew needed to happen, that Devin and I needed to go back to church. I knew, I think I have that sign somewhere in my house, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. And I thought, well, you're not taking your wife to church, and yeah, you got problems, and I was angry at the church and stuff for a lot of stuff. And, there's reasons I wasn't going, but, I knew that wasn't right for my wife, and I needed to take my wife to church. So it was on my mind, and, I was feeling convicted about it, I guess. And I kind of am of the mind of, I can read, and, the church had a very big part in people's lives when society was mostly illiterate. But we can all read the book for ourselves now. I don't need a priest to explain it to me. So that was my attitude. Anyway, at some point I just mentioned it down there that, I probably need to find a church, but, good luck finding one when you look like me and you believe some of the things I believe. And of course everybody thinks their church is awesome, so people, well, you ought to come to my church, and then you look into it and you're like, nope, there's no way. I can't even go in that place. They throw me out. Or, they believe something that I don't, and I've made those concessions before where, I'll hang out with these Calvinists or whatever, and I'm not, but okay, they're nice people and they're Christians, so but eventually, when you start really getting into things and you really want to move on and move forward and move up, with God, then those things get in the way, I basically dismissed her, and Diane's Diane, and she wouldn't be dismissed, and she kept talking to me, and then she, introduced me to her husband, Rick, and then I was like, oh, he's a rock and roll guy, and then got to know him a little bit, and then met his brother, Brad, and, got to know him a little bit, and even went to go see them play, and pretty soon it's like, okay, well, let me look up that church. And one thing I will say for ACC, they have a good website. You guys actually have some good information on the website, and I was able to see a lot of the theology and what the people believed here, and I was like, okay, that actually jives. Like, everything's what I think. And, they let Rick go on stage, and at that time he had long hair, of course, shortly after I come here, all the Heddens cut their hair and stuff, and now I'm the only one with long hair, but whatever. Anyway, so I looked at the website, and I couldn't find any reason not to. And I was really trying, and eventually I talked to Devin, and we found out, that there was services online. So we attended for a couple weeks online. And then I was like, all right, they're not too weird. I mean, the preacher seems okay. I like what the preacher's saying. So we came, and, people weren't too weirded out. I know I have talked to the security guys now that I'm on the security team, and they did say that they made note of me the first time I came in. But I've also told them, I was like, yeah, that was on purpose. But anyway.
Your job.
I semi-retired at 40, and I was diagnosed shortly after. So then I kind of like definitely steered into the semi-retired. I did retail for about 20 years, something like that. Not all at the same time. I drove a truck for a year just to make some money, and I needed to be alone. So I drove a truck for a year and just spent a year alone in a truck with myself and God. And after that, I went and worked at Walmart for 15 years. And at the end, I was in a lot of pain, and I couldn't figure out why. But I knew I couldn't work 8 hours anymore. I just, on that floor, concrete floor and everything, my back was hurting so bad. I would be almost in tears. And I'm somebody that has a pretty high pain threshold. I've actually learned that it is actually a detriment that I have such a high pain threshold because I've ignored very serious red flags and was part of the problem. Anyway, so I realized that was why I had to leave Walmart. I just couldn't do my job anymore. I couldn't function. And I know now why. I thought I was just getting old. And, I'd worked in warehouses and on the floor, and I never took care of my body. I was always the person that would, we need to throw some TVs up on the top or whatever, put me on the walker stacker, throw them to me, whatever it was, I was always kind of the one that was willing to sacrifice my body or whatever a little bit. So I just thought it was that coming home to roost. I would have these old guys tell me, "You're going to regret this," and I thought, well, they were right. And it turns out it was cancer. But so I quit doing that, and then, I teach the Krav Maga. I had the buy-sell business. That's really short. It's me and Devin. That's it. And we have 2 cats. Our cats are like our kids. We're on our 2nd generation of kids. My first boy, he lived 18 years, so I figure that's how long you get with a kid, kidding, of course, but I know that it's not the same. But now we have a couple new ones. We met in a sound booth, actually, so it's kind of full circle now that we do sound together. It's also funny that she now runs the board because I was running the board when she came in. She came into my sound booth. We've been married almost, I think it is 20 years now, or real close to it. So, and I know when we were married, I just don't know what today is. So, we've never wanted children. It's actually one of the reasons that we got married was that we both agreed on that. And I always say I wouldn't marry somebody unless they agreed that they didn't want children, because it's the one thing you can't compromise on. You can't have half a child. You're either going to have children or you're not. There's no compromise. And somebody's going to have to lose themselves. I was willing for the right person maybe to have a kid because I always thought, well, if I have one, I'm sure I'll love it. What a great way to go into dadhood, So, I tried to avoid it. I knew I wouldn't be a dad. I wouldn't be a good dad. So, at least not when I was younger at the appropriate age. I was not able to be a father. So, we did. And so it's just me and Devin. I'm going to do both. My favorite hobby is board games, card games, strategy. That's the kind of stuff I love. I love strategy. Military strategy, but just strategy in general, I really like. My pastime is music. If I can listen to music and play a game, I'm pretty happy. Yeah, I talk too much. I rabbit trail too much. Like you're saying, some people really have a hard time following me in conversation. My best friend, the one that I was talking about that I learned sound with and stuff growing up, he was the one person that I really could just be myself talking to, because me and him both have the skill of being able to talk and listen at the same time. So we just talk. It's very confusing for other people if they're around us. We usually have to just kind of hang out, just us, to be comfortable, because we will both just talk constantly. And so I'm talking, you're talking, I'm hearing what you're saying, and then I'm reacting to it. Just like you would in a text thread. People do it in text threads, but they, for some reason, can't do it out loud. My brain does it in both. So just like in texting, when you're waiting, you see the dots, and you're like, but I want to say one more thing before you say that. To me, that's the way conversation should work. But most people can't do it, and they find it rude. Boxes. a lot of it is to do with the board games. So you get a board game, and again, these board games are not normal. You get a board game, and then in a year they come out with an expansion. And they come out with another expansion. They come out with 15 expansions, or whatever it is. Content to add to the game, to keep the game interesting, keep the game growing with you. And they all come in boxes. And I have a tendency to keep those boxes because I might sell it. And maybe I want to sell just one of the expansions and not the whole game or whatever. Or it's worth more if I can part them all out. I just need to throw it all away because I'm basically paying to store boxes. I also have this really weird thing where anytime I buy something, I keep the box until we decide if we're going to keep it or until we're sure it works or whatever. And then it usually gets buried before I actually say, okay, we're good, I can throw this away now. And now it's like, oh, well, it's 3 boxes deep. Yeah, I'll get it some other time. YouTube, not even close. I use YouTube playlists. I know a lot of people say Spotify and whatever, and I'm like, YouTube does it. I don't know why I have to use 2 different things. And that simplicity and efficiency is a really big thing to me, also from gaming. Some gamings are actually efficiency engines and things like that, like math, those things. So the more I can boil something down, the better. So if something can serve a bunch of different purposes, like I don't carry something on my person unless it has at least 2 uses. With YouTube, I can listen to music. I can connect it to the Bluetooth in my car and I play music there. I just discovered how I can do that. I can make playlists. I have like multiple playlists. I have playlists that it makes for me. I have playlists that I make for me. I have, and then you can just pick a song and it'll be like, oh, I get it. And it'll just make a playlist based on a single song. It's useful for home repair stuff. I also use it for board game stuff. This was actually really hard. Because for me, it's not about the food or whatever. You can get good food anywhere. I've had lobster, it's fine, whatever. But I think it would be about the location or whatever more than anything. So, I suppose I could pick a cafe on the Champs-Élysées in Paris or something like that. But to be honest, me and my wife talked about it, and she's like, it's Mama Rosa's. And I'm like, yeah, it is. So there's a place called Mama Rosa's in Estes Park, Colorado. It's right outside of Rocky Mountain National Park. It's my favorite place on earth, the park that is. And there's a little Italian restaurant called Mama Rosa's, and they have decent food, but they have an amazing cannoli. And I drove 12 hours for that cannoli once. What do you think it is?
Music.
Yeah, it's music. 100%. So I used to experiment on myself with music to see if I could change my mood or make myself have a different mood or regulate my mood or whatever with music.
Did it work?
To a certain extent, yeah. I mean, there's only so much you can do, but especially if you go with it. I mean, if you're trying to do that, yeah, I feel like it can do that. I would have told you nothing not that long ago.
Mm-hmm.
I did go to church when I was younger and was part of a youth group and actually really enjoyed it. It's where my sense of community comes from. Because otherwise, I'm an individual all the way. And everybody talks about their talents, and I didn't have any. And that always felt really bad to me, because, this person can sing, this person can play piano, this person, whatever. And, people are finding all these talents, and I just don't have any. I'm just kind of this messed up kid that really has a lot of issues. And I'll be lucky to even make it or whatever. It's kind of how I felt. I said, I'll just be a beggar on the streets of heaven. I don't care. That's fine. But not that long ago, I was actually angry. And I was kind of in my head just saying, what's wrong with people? Why can't people see this? It's just simple math. And God said, not everybody's good at math. And it hit me. I'm decent at math. And I suppose that's a talent. Not everybody's decent at it. And then I felt like God kind of, had his opportunity to speak to me. I was listening for a second. He said, you know that your talents are just the things that are easy, right? The things you're good at are the things that you find easy. So you don't think you have talents because you just find certain things easy. but you're not good at them. It's weird. One of my best talents is super weird, is I'm fairly unaffected by violence, or at least not the way other people are. And again, I considered myself really messed up as a kid and whatever, because, I don't know, that's a weird thing, to be super comfortable with violence. Whatever. I took a perverse joy in messing with my teenage friends and whatever, and freaking them out and creeping them out and whatever, because of course I could handle things or whatever that they couldn't. Dark sense of humor, all that. And I finally realized very recently, within the last couple of years, that's why you can teach Krav Maga. It's why you can be on the security team. It's why you can do these things. Because you can look at and study violence. And for you, it's just a machine. For me, it's just a machine. It's just like, okay, this person got upset, or they got off their meds, or whatever. Okay, then they go here, they go do this. This person is in the way. This person, is in the wrong place at the wrong time. How could that have been prevented? How could that person have prevented it themselves? That sort of thing. And I just start looking at all the pieces. For me, it's just a mechanism. It's just another machine to look at. But other people are like, but something horrible just happened. I'm like, oh yeah, well, that's why we're doing this. That's why we're doing the work, so that it doesn't happen again. And I always just think I was cold and uncaring. And I realized, I'm like, no, I care a lot. I'm not going to vomit. It's a bike, 100%. I mean, again, 80s kid, 100% necessary to get around. It was freedom. It was everything. If you have to go outside first thing in the morning and you can't come back until the streetlights come on, I mean, you need transportation. You're not just going to sit on the front stoop for 12 hours or whatever it is in the summer. Yeah, you got to have a place to go. So, and get away from the people that just kicked you out of their house. So, yeah, bike, 100%. After that, Atari and then Nintendo. And I don't know if I consider any of those a toy. Devin was getting on me. My wife, she was saying, well, that's not a toy. That's, But maybe my Transformer. I had a Transformer as a kid. That I had Mind Warp. It was the purple and black F-16 that transformed, and I have the Masterpiece collection of it on my desk now. That's like this big or whatever. Tried to learn how to play guitar as a kid. I was terrible, and I really probably should have went and taken lessons, but there wasn't money and there wasn't time. So I just beat my head against the wall trying to figure it out for about 10 years, and I'm really into music, and I'm really a big music critic. So eventually, I just got really tired of listening to myself. I'm like, this guy's terrible. He should quit playing. And I realized I was talking about myself, so I did. The only thing I've ever really, that I can think of is gasoline. I mean, I drove a truck for a while. The smell of diesel actually makes me sleepy. And not for the reason you think. But I slept on top of a diesel engine for a year. So the sound of a diesel engine mixed. So if I go to a rest area, at night when I'm traveling, oh man, the sound of those trucks sitting there idling, I just want to go crawl up and want to go to sleep. A fork on a plate.
Really?
For sure, yeah. That makes me want to throw the plate out in the street. If somebody does it twice, I don't know where you're eating, but it's not here. It's dying violently. It's being ripped apart, tortured, dismembered, whatever. And going back to weird talent, I've had that in my head since I was a little kid, like 5, 6, something like that. Struggled with that. And again, maybe it's just because I was supposed to end up teaching people about violence or whatever. I've mashed that button flat. I've tried to desensitize myself as much as possible. That was, even as a kid, my way of dealing with it. And, now I'm a goth, and there's a skull in every room of my house if you look closely. And I actually almost wore a shirt today that said, "Get it straight, death isn't the end, it's the beginning." And I have an interesting relationship with death. That's just even gotten more interesting now that I'm sick. But I'm proud to say, I've stayed me. My attitudes have not really changed. They've increased, if anything. My attitudes towards death. Yeah, again, it would probably just be Rocky Mountain National Park. because I love it. It's beautiful. The air is clean. Everything about it's clean. It just feels clean. I don't know. That's probably the best way I can say it. It feels clean, and I mean that even in like a biblical sense or whatever. It just feels clean. It feels unperverted, unbroken. So it feels like there's little pieces there where the world's actually the way it's supposed to be. Like this bush, right here in this little nook behind this rock is the way God meant it, or whatever. And, probably not even that, but, because the world's so broken. But, yeah, I think I just feel that beauty and peace there. And, again, Paris or something like that, but, do I look like I would enjoy Paris? Yeah, I have no idea. That's a tough one because of me being sick. I would have to go back so far to where I believe I was healthy and not in pain. Because, as I said earlier, I ignored pain so long that I've been in pain most of my life. I have a t-shirt that says, "In my world, there is no end to pain," which is a song lyric. That's kind of true. So I don't know. If I could live at like 45 but be healthy, that would probably be my choice. I'm incredibly stubborn and incredibly strong-willed to the point that, I feel like a few times God's had to really get a hold of me. And I call it hitting me with a 2x4 to get me to listen, which I told him to do. I gotta listen. I don't want, to fall away or whatever. So, I can't stand the thought of that. So do whatever it takes. It's like I tell the doctors, they're like, "Well, how are you doing this treatment or that treatment?" And you're getting through it. I'm like, "Well, isn't a pine box the alternative? It's do this or give up and go shopping for a casket. I'm going to do this for a little bit longer if you don't mind. Something I have to give up. Well, if I wanted to give it up, I give it up. And if I'm still doing it, I don't think I should give it up." Smooth is fast and fast is sloppy. So doing something efficiently and smoothly is the way to be fast. But if you try to be fast, you're just going to create chaos and you're going to mess something up. All of it.
Why? That's who God made you.
Maybe keep the hair. Yeah, exactly. That's who God made me. And that's the only way I can deal with it. But then I think about that stuff and I'm like, well, but if you fixed this or that, then I wouldn't be who I am. And that's where it comes to that acceptance, and realizing that God made you who you are. I just want to be the best person that God made. You don't have to be somebody else. You just have to be the best you. God created you. He doesn't want somebody else. If he wanted somebody else, he would have created somebody else. I see myself, I think, the way God does. So I see it and I'm like, okay, I understand why I kind of have to love myself. But I also see all the reasons why I need to be better. It's probably The Godfather, the first one. It's just a well-done movie. It's a well-done piece of art. It's obviously about gangsters, so that's not great. But it's also about family. They have their business and they have their family. And their business family and their family family. And how do they balance that and everything? And I always found that fascinating. I'm a really, really individualistic person, really into self-reliance. Again, I'm the guy with water in his basement, whatever, teaches self-defense. I'm that guy. Yeah, if I have a big problem, I might go to the person in my life who has the most information on said problem. I might go to YouTube about said problem. I'm going to just find the best person. There's not like that person in my life. I don't have a mentor. I don't have...
Do you want a mentor?
Probably everybody does. I think, but I'd like to be one more than I want one. I like to help people. I like especially, one of my favorite things, one of the favorite, preacher stories or whatever that I've ever heard was a story about some guys, you know, traveling in the woods and they go across a bridge and, you know, the bridge is like one of those suspension bridges with boards missing and whatever, which I hate those things. And, you know, they get across it and there's three of them and two of the guys are like, okay, we made it. You know, that was really hard. Whew. Okay, we can go. Let's go. And the other guy's like, I'm going to stay back and try to repair the bridge. I'm like, what are you doing? You know, and he's like, well, I mean, we broke 3 more boards. You know, we barely made it across, and now that gap's even bigger. And you remember those kids we passed? They're not going to make it. Those young guys that we passed an hour ago, when they get here, they're not going to make it up across that bridge. There's no way. They don't have it. You know, we got to fix it. You know, and that's me. I want to make, I feel like my path was very difficult, and I had no help doing it. And I would like to fix that for other people. My wedding day. Okay, so I said that one on my own. And it is. I mean, it's funny because women always want guys to say that, but that day's all about you. It's not about us. There's nothing there for the man on that day, you know, other than actually getting married. So, and that's what I remember. I remember actually standing there with my wife, holding her hand and realizing when I take my next step, we're married, you know. And that was interesting. And I remember thinking, like, this is weird. Like, I walked up here in one way, in one form, and I'm going to walk away in another form. And there's very few times in life that are that drastic or whatever. Baptism, marriage, you know, that sort of thing. Having a kid, not that I know about that. But yeah. But otherwise, it would be hikes that we took in Rocky Mountain National Park. It would be, you know, Emerald Lake, which is just this lake that you really have to hike to, and you're alone when you're up there because the crowd doesn't go up there, and usually you can be up there for at least an hour or whatever before somebody else comes up there. There's a few lakes like that, a few trips that we've taken like that, where we've been able to hike far enough out into the wilderness where it was just us, or drive with the Jeep far enough into the desert or whatever where there's just nothing but us in nature. And that's what I like. When I'm upset, I go in the woods. You know, if I can't center myself, I go find nature. You know, put my fingers in the dirt, you know, or whatever, and feel the earth. So those are my best memories, probably. Yeah. It was having my wound vac changed after my big surgery. I developed an infection, had to go back in the hospital. After my surgery, I was in the ICU for 5 days. Got out for about a week, developed a post-op infection, had to go back. Had another surgery, actually had another set of surgeries. So after they did the debridement, they left me open and put a wound vac on and packed it. So it was like that for 5 days, and every few hours they put in a cleaning solution, did whatever. It was horrible, very uncomfortable. Anyway, about day 3, this nurse walks in, she reeks of cigarettes and whatever, and which will become important in a minute. And she says, "Hey, I'm the wound nurse." "Cool, what's a wound nurse?" "I'm here to change your dressing." "I don't have a dressing." She's like, "Well, which leg is it?" Like, I'd get out of my room, you know, and I did. I told her, "Get out of my room. You're not in the right room, leave." And she said, "No, I'm here to change your dressing." I said, "Okay, I see it's a chest, you know, whatever." Like, you don't know who I am. You get out of my room, you know. And I think finally my nurse that I knew came in, "Yeah, this is supposed to happen." You know, she just looked at the wrong chart, whatever. Okay, well, I don't want the lady that looked at the wrong chart and came in here with the wrong information doing this, but whatever. And then Devin explains, "Hey, he's weaned himself off the pain meds because I don't like that stuff and I get off of it as soon as I can. And I have a very high pain tolerance." So I'm in the hospital, but I've already weaned myself off the meds. And she's like, "He hasn't had anything today. He's completely sober, has no pain meds in his system." She said, "It's okay, I'll just go quick." And she tried to rip it off like a Band-Aid. And it was like this, you know, my whole chest with a wound vac in there and packing and whatever. And she thought she was just going to rip that out real quick. So she starts getting it started over here, and then she just rips. And I saw the skin on this side come into my peripheral vision, so it must have been about this far from my chest, because that's where my pinky enters my peripheral vision here. And I was laying in the bed like this. So that's, she pulled my skin away that far, I think, from my chest. And it was one of those out-of-body moments where, look, I'm having a problem. Why is that person screaming? They need to stop screaming because I'm, and then, oh, it's me screaming, and like everybody on the floor came running. I'm sure my vitals spiked. The nurse that watches the vitals in the other room came running in. My other nurse came running in, whatever. The nurse that did it acted like it was my fault, got mad, said, I'm going to go smoke a cigarette, I'll be back. And just left it as it was. And luckily, then my nurse went and got some intravenous stuff and gave me some intravenous pain meds. And then the lady came in and finished. I apologized to Devin profusely and realized, why are you on the floor? Like, she crumpled to the floor. She was still holding my hand, but because she saw it. And she saw down into my chest and stuff. She's like, I can see your bones. Like, she's like, don't look down, don't look down. She just, and she was completely white, like even whiter than she always is. She's pale, but this was like, a sheet of paper white, no lip color. And I was like, what happened? And I'm like, I'm sorry I screamed, I'm sorry I'm crying or something. And she's like, no, it's completely justified what you just went through. And she kind of explained it to me. And I remember looking at the wall later and seeing measurements and realizing it was the wound. And I was like, there's 3 measurements. So there's length or height and width. The other one's depth. And it was like 2 inches or whatever. I was like, like that goes down into me like that far. You think your sternum's right there, but there's a lot of flesh and whatever, So, yeah, that was my worst memory. So, cancer, thymoma, some people call it, some people would know it by thymic carcinoma, but technically what I have is thymoma. It's a cancer that grows in your chest. The thymus gland is kind of right up in here. And mine just blew up and became this giant set of tumors. I had open chest surgery and I had an 8-pound tumor removed, single tumor that was 8 pounds, and then I had 2 pounds of little tumors removed. So I had 10 pounds total taken out of my chest, which I always joke with ladies, I don't want to hear about it anymore. Like, I had basically a C-section, with a 10-pounder, so, I don't want to hear it. I just carried really high. I carried way up in my chest, but I did carry 10 pounds and had a bunch of pleural fluid and everything. So, the whole bit. Because there was about another 10 pounds of fluid in my chest, which they had actually drained before the surgery, so that was really good. After the big surgery, they woke me up without her being there, and I was tubed and I was in restraints, and that's one of my worst fears. I talked about my worst fear being dismembered or whatever, but it's tortured is actually probably what I should say. So being strapped down in a bed or whatever and not having agency and not being able to get out. I apologize to every person on that floor at least twice, because I became violent. I told them to not wake me up and not have her be the first thing I see. I cannot be held responsible if I don't see her face when I wake up. And they found out I wasn't playing. So I remember trying to grab a nurse's wedding ring because I was trying to ask, where's my wife? And I'm tubed. I can't talk. And although I tried, and I remember thinking, I will be the first person to make a sound. And I was trying to figure out how to push air up around the tube. And, I was like, if I can, I was like, I just want to make a squeak, like a balloon or anything. I was like, I will be the first person to be able to make a sound with this tube in there. Or I will force it out of me, with my esophagus. I was trying to push it out with my esophagus. I was like, swallow in reverse, like throw up, trying to throw up the tube, all these things. And I was trying to get a hold of the nurse, and I finally did. And and I'm grabbing her ring, and I'm holding onto her ring, and trying to say, and I'm, I don't have my ring on, but I'm laying there in the bed doing this, trying to, I'm in straps. I can't point with the other hand, and I'm pointing at my wedding, my ring finger. I want to know where my wife is. I tried to sign wife. Realized I needed to brush up on my ASL because I didn't know the alphabet like I thought I did. But I tried to spell out wife. I tried to write wife in the air. And when they finally pulled the tube out, which if anybody's had that tube, they know that everything falls once the tube comes out. All of your saliva, everything, once it pulls that tube out, it kind of falls. So you'll cough and whatever. But before that happened, the moment that tube came out, I looked at the doctor and said, "You're bad at charades, man." She showed up about a half hour later because they had scheduled it, that they were going to wake me up when they got there. But this doctor got there early and I think just wanted to get it over with. So he did it without her being there. But about the time I'm starting to really figure out where I am and I'm yelling at everybody, then she finally walks in the room and I said, "There you are, what's going on?" And she was so happy because I didn't realize it, but I had died the night before. So she was just happy that I was alive, and I was angry because in the past I've been a very angry person. I really have had problems with rage, as you know. And I can be very, very angry. And she was just happy to see me angry because she's like, if he's angry, he's healthy. He's all right, because they were worried that I might have brain damage or whatever. And she comes in and, I'm wanting to know where in the world she's been and what is wrong with these people. I told them not to do that. Didn't you tell them not to do that? And she's just smiling the whole time, and I can't figure out why. And where's my tablet? Did you text this person or that? Because I had people that I promised I was going to text them as soon as I got out of surgery that were worrying. And she said, "It's not what day you think it is." And that made me do that. Huh? What do you mean it's not what day I think it is, And then I realized the light was wrong. And I realized it was morning and it was supposed to be evening. And it was the wrong light. And I stopped. What happened? And that's when she explained it to me. I vaguely remember waking up the right way, seeing Devin, smiling at her. And that's all I really remember. I crashed right after the surgery. My heart fell over. The tumor was on my right lung, basically. It more or less eclipsed the whole lung. And to the point that it was actually pushing my heart. My heart was almost like about an inch from my rib cage over here, which it's not supposed to be. But it was like pushed way over and everything. Anyway, I was sleeping sitting up at that point. I was basically having congestive heart failure at that point. So they get the fluid out, they do the surgery. The problem is the lung didn't inflate fast enough, and my pericardium has been destroyed. So the heart doesn't have anything holding it. They thought the lung would plump up quick enough that it would hold the heart in place. It didn't, apparently, so the heart flipped over and pumped itself empty. I think it actually landed on the vena cava, so it just pumped itself empty. That's the big thing, bringing stuff back. So it's going out, it's not coming back in. And so I crashed, and they got me back, and then I crashed again, and they rushed me back into surgery. And I would be dead if it wasn't for the fact that the doctors stopped in the hallway to talk to the nurse. So when the page went out, they were still in the hallway. So they were still extremely close. He told me, if I'd have gotten on the elevator, you'd be dead. So, because, you were dead. Your heart flipped over, you weren't coming back. There was no CPR that was going to fix it. There was nothing until we got you in surgery. So luckily, I was in the ICU. The surgery was just the OR was just a few feet away. They had just come out of it. It was still set up, and they rushed me right back into surgery. And literally, nurse on top of me, like the movies, trying to wake me up, Devin said she was even clawing, like digging her claws in to try to wake me up and, try to get some sort of response, and doing CPR and bagging me a whole bit, rushed me back into surgery. So I crashed again once they got me stable and crashed in surgery. I do have a very clear memory now of waking up on the table. They woke me up to see if I was okay and to see if I was brain damaged, because I was without blood and oxygen for a little bit. And I remember them asking me, how many fingers do you see, this sort of thing. And I flipped out because I know exactly why they're asking. And at that time, again, in restraints, and I started asking for a way to write. because I want to let him know that I'm there. At that point, and then the next morning when I woke up in her streets, both times I had the thought, am I one? From Metallica, you know. No sight, no hearing, no leg, no limbs, no, you know, you're just locked in a body, you know, and I remember thinking, oh no, am I one? Am I a prisoner in this body until I die? I have no way to communicate, and that's what I was afraid of. That's what I thought had happened. That's what they were afraid had happened. So I start vigorously, you know, I'm blinking, I'm doing, you know, just like, I'm here, you know, trust me, I'm here, I'm in here. And in my head, I'm screaming, you know, and all I can hear is that guy screaming in the video for the song. And anyway, the nurse was like, he wants to write. He's asking to write. And I remember hearing that nurse say that. And I remember like pointing, like, yes, listen to her. And the doctor telling me, okay, you know, we're good. I think everything's fine. And I was like, no, you know. And at that time, he leaned over, and I remember seeing the mask, not the surgical mask, but the big one, whatever they call that, and the mask, but the face shield or whatever. He leans over me, and I remember looking up and seeing him in the face shield, and he said, you are open on the operating table right now. I need to close you. I'll talk to you tomorrow. And I remember going, oh, okay. My eyes got real big. I centered them, and I closed them. Like, okay, you know, like, do what you got to do. And then I remember them putting me back to sleep. So that was how I died, and pretty cool story, you know. Devin was praying and stuff, and hundreds of people were, you know, because we had multiple churches praying for us, all our friends and family, whatever. And we're going here at the time, but anyway, Devin had a vision at that time. God showed her the OR, and she had a vision of the OR, and she could see that they were calm and that they were just working, and it was quiet, and that there was nothing going on, which I believe is real, because from what I've found out and understood that was real, there was, you know, they went in unexpectedly, so they didn't have music on like they normally would or anything like that. So she said it was just, and she said at that time they were calm. They weren't freaking out, which if he had just talked to me, whatever, that jives, you know. And I was awake, so I don't remember hearing music or anything either, you know what I mean? It jives. So I kind of really do believe that happened. Last lady you had in here, I can't remember her name.
Carol?
Carol, I'm going to trust you on that. Miss Carol had said, you know, when you're in that situation, you just do it. It's just Romans 8:28. That's what it is. God can use anything, even the absolute most horrible thing, even the worst thing that could happen, you know, which I think cancer is pretty bad. I don't know if it's the worst thing that happens to me. It was pretty bad. And I mean, I know that my death probably won't be pleasant. You know, I'm probably going to suffocate to death, you know, that sort of thing. There's a million little things, and that's what I want to write down, but I guess the big thing is just knowing that God can use everything. And I'm at a church now. I'm doing this. I'm doing things I never would have done before. Like I said, sometimes I got hit with a 2x4, and I'm not saying God gave me cancer, but I'm saying He used it. I think it's going good. I think the group is gelling and all those things, but, you know, I look at the bulletin and I see that there's more people, and, you know, I'd like them to come too. And I don't want to, like, harangue anybody or, you know, or make anybody feel uncomfortable, but, you know, I do wish people would just come. You know, maybe you think you've got it figured out and you don't need to. Well, cool, come for me, you know, because I might need that inspiration, you know. And if it's the other way of like, well, I'm nervous or whatever, well, that's the point. You know, that's what we want to do. The point is to help each other and to talk to people that get it. And I think that's a lot of it too, is people like, well, I've tried to talk about it, you know, and it's just, I was like, yeah, that's why you talk to other cancer patients, because they do understand what you're going through. And yeah, you know, your other people in your life, even though they really care and they might have the best of intentions, maybe they just don't totally get it. And now you can talk to people that do. And again, okay, if you've got that really weird thing that people wouldn't get, well, then come so that you can help the next person that comes that has that, you know. When I was a teenager, I remember being in a hallway. It was at some youth event. We were away and whatever. We were in this big school, and I remember I was off by myself, as I do. I can only handle people so much. And I was slumped in a doorway in this school, and I remember having the feeling that I was going to be murdered at my own hand. That's how much my mind was not my own at that moment. That's how I saw it. Not the other word. I saw it as murder. In my mind, again, another song. There's a song called Swarming Spirits, it's a Christian song, but it's, two spirits call my name, one from glory, one from shame, each burning a different flame. And at that moment, all I could see was one of them. It was just so, my life was in such turmoil, such chaos at that moment. And I had been trying to figure it out, whatever. And, it was just in a really bad place. And bad things were going to happen. And I remember praying and saying, give me 10 minutes of clarity, and I will go get help. I will do it. I will do what needs done. But I need 5 minutes where I can have my own mind. And it was instant. And I went and gave what I had been writing to my youth pastor. Said, you can't let me out of your sight the rest of the weekend. Which unfortunately he couldn't do. He was busy doing some other stuff. So he grabbed a couple of my friends and said, you don't leave his side, the rest of the weekend. And then when we got back, he talked to me and stuff. So that's probably the big transformation we're looking for, whatever. But I was already saved by then. I just got in a really, again, I was a teenager. I was being a teenager, being confused, and being unwise. I didn't have any wisdom at the time. I didn't, I was a new human being in this world trying to figure it out, and it was very confusing. And I definitely messed it up pretty bad a couple times and had to get put back on the track. It's been the whole time. I mean, God's in everything. God's in even before you're a believer. It doesn't matter if you're a believer or not. That God's in that speaker. God's in that chair. Everything. It was created by God. We've manipulated it, and took a bunch of petroleum and made it into plastic and whatever, but just everything was created by God. And like we talked about seeing beauty and everything or whatever, there's every little grain of sand, every little thing, every little cell in your body is there because God put it there, or at least put it in the world, and then, whatever. So, the whole story. But I think for me, out of all this, the biggest thing, and it's weird because I haven't mentioned it even a little bit, again, the between the ears stuff. Finally, one day, I asked God the same question I've asked him, I don't know how many times. Something along the lines of, why are we here? And I don't mean why are we, I mean, why are we here? Why were we created? What am I supposed to be doing? Why, another song lyric, you gave me a life, now show me how to live. And it's like, okay, I'm here, I'm alive, but what am I supposed to, show me how to live, show me how to do this right. Obviously I'm doing it wrong. Obviously. It's all messed up. I know that. I don't need anybody to tell me that. But how do I do it better? I do not see the path. And, obviously there's an instruction manual. It's about this thick. It's called the Bible. You could go read that. And one of my favorite blues songs is called Nobody's Fault But Mine. And it's, why haven't you read the Bible? Well, it's nobody's fault but mine. And it talks about, well, my sister taught me to read, this, that, and the other. And it's basically all these obstacles have been cleared, but I still don't do what I should do. It's nobody's fault but mine. It's this old blues song. Because a lot of old blues stuff is actually religious. A lot of people don't realize that. A lot of it's also really not religious, but a lot of it is. But anyway, Yeah, so it's like a blues / Southern gospel song or whatever. But anyway, nobody's fault but mine, so, yeah, okay, I need to read the Bible more. Okay, cool. But that still doesn't really explain it. Like, it's not in there. I've read it enough that I know the answer to my question's not in there. Like, what am I doing? What is the purpose? Like, even if you tell me what to do, even if I understood it, but why? Why am I doing it? Why did all of this happen? Why is it like this? It didn't have to be. And I feel like I got an answer. I don't know if you can use it or not, but I finally got an answer. And it gave me peace. And now I'm good. The answer is because if you were perfect and the and I think is the part I always missed. If you were perfect and I put you in a perfect environment, so I call it perfection within perfection, and God explained the concept of perfection inside perfection to me, because the stone that drops in the pond can be perfect. But if the pond has reeds growing out of it, the concentric circles that come out from that will be distorted. And they'll hit those reeds and it'll cause distortion. And if you go a few feet out, you'll see nothing but distortion in the water. But you dropped a perfect pebble that was perfectly round, that you had, you could machine it if you wanted to. And you can drop it with a machine that drops it perfectly. You can do all the things. And it still won't be right, because what you're dropping it into isn't right. So it's not good enough for you to be perfect, even if that was possible, which it isn't, unless I do it, God talking, through grace. But even then, I would have to then put you in a perfect environment. Otherwise, you would still be misunderstood, and you would still be seen as imperfect. You would still be seen as a sinner even, like my son was. Okay, got it? Because the world's imperfect. The world will just try to kill you if you're perfect. The world will destroy you almost immediately if you're perfect. So I have to make you right and then put you in heaven. Or the recreated world, whatever you want to say. Okay, fine. Why? Because if I didn't do that, you would make the same mistake a third of the angels made. Think it was you. You're right. It's the only way I could learn. You have to be in a broken world as a broken person to learn when I make it right, it's all me. You're welcome. And that's, your will, not mine. And that's when I think I can give it up completely. Because that's when I realize every single thing is her to serve God and to serve His plan. Every grain of sand and every archangel and every person in between was made for Him, for His plans, for His will, for His glory. And figuring that out, I'm good. Satan is currently Lord of this world temporarily. And again, I didn't understand that until that realization and stuff, and realizing that that's, well, I'm not going to get too into theology, but it changes, like when Satan talks to Jesus in the woods, and interrogates Jesus in the woods. I think it really changed all that for me. Like, I read that differently now, and I understand what's happening. It's about this broken world and the plan to fix it. And this guy's trying to figure out what's happening, and this guy's like, yeah, I'm not dumb enough to tell you, and go ahead, kill me, I strike, if you strike me down, I'll become more powerful than you can imagine, Star Wars. And that's what it is, and I realize now, it's like, oh man, that scene's almost funny now, like, the pathetic Satan trying to figure it out. Why are you here? And even when he casts the demons out and they want to go in the pigs in Matthew, why are you here ahead of the time? There's an agreed upon time, Why are you here? You're early. And that was interesting. And all that, like, means more now, because I realized, so back to your question, the whole world's broken. So all of it. Every piece of me is fighting against it, every piece of the world is fighting against it, even though it's all God's creation, it's all been corrupted. Every bit of it's unclean. The questions I had, are gone, are good. I got what I need, which isn't much. I just had a couple questions. And always be careful. I would just say that. Read Job before you ask too many questions. My favorite verse in the Bible, and one of the only ones that I can quote halfway decent, and I'll say that and I'll put it on camera and it won't be right, but who is this that darkens my counsel with words without knowledge? Strengthen yourself like a man. I will question you and you will answer me. Where were you when I laid the foundations of the sea? Where were you when I measured the depths? Answer me if you understand. And I love that line. Answer me if you understand. And it's like, do you even get what I'm saying to you? Let alone be able to answer. There's no way you can answer it. But do you even understand the question? Person who's questioning me, the creator, the Alpha and the Omega, the one who wasn't created. You really gonna ask me that in that tone? So be careful, for sure. But when done right, God can answer your questions. He can handle it. He can handle doubts, all that. So yeah, all that taken care of and cleared. So now it's just about, in my opinion, it's just about leveling up. It's just about it's the process of sanctification. It's just that. It's just sanctification now. It's like, okay, you're saved. Now get better. The doctor's here. Start working with him and start getting better. You wanted to get better, get better. So it's just about following convictions. It's just about the next thing that God says, this is next. This is not great, right? Well, of course. So this is what we're going to work on next. Okay, sounds good. Let's do that. And yeah. So for me, it's just leveling up. It's just getting better. It's just, the process of sanctification. Which as a Nazarene, I didn't understand until recently. I was raised Nazarene, and I didn't understand sanctification. And now I do, and I'm actually excited about it. I have learned a ton of theology from YouTube because you can, learn so much. There's so many great teachers, and there's obviously a lot of really bad ones, and that's where you have to use your discernment, and you have to figure it out, But yeah, you don't have to fit a mold. There's not a formula that you follow to become a Christian, which is a problem that I have with fundamentalism, because they literally tried to make a formula. And I used to have a fundamentalist preacher friend, and I would always argue that with him. And I still think he's wrong, but he's going to heaven, and we'll have this conversation again in heaven. It's fine, no hard feelings, but there's not a formula. And if there is, that works for some people. I used to say that when I was in youth group. I used to tell them, look, in our youth wall or whatever, I actually went to Watkins at the time and bought a bunch of posters and stuff. And, Amy Grant, Carmen, and, all that garbage. But yeah, all these, contemporary singers, Sandy Patty, all that stuff. And I bought like one or two rock bands. And, everybody in the youth group, the youth pastor, this is disgusting. And I said, can't I just have one spot on the wall? I went and put up the Amy Grant and the Carmen and the stuff I think is garbage. Because I understand that's your path to God. Can't you honor mine? This rock band that actually speaks to me. And I understand. And Sandy Patty is not going to save me or my friends. Or anybody I know. That's never going to speak to them. Not where they are now, anyway. And you say you want to reach them where they are, this ain't going to do it, So that would be the biggest thing, maybe, is to just say, God doesn't create garbage. And if you think you're garbage, it's because you've been corrupted. It's not because you're wrong. You just need to fix you. And like I was saying earlier, what I learned from the purpose-driven life thing, just be the best you. And that's all you're really called to do. You don't have to be Superman. You don't have to be somebody else. When I took that pressure off myself, that really helped. Because, again, I'm not a fan of me. And I wanted to try to be someone else. Well, I was going to fail at that. I'm not going to successfully be someone else. It's not humanly possible. I can only be me. So I have to accept that, because it's God's will and all. And just do what I'm supposed to do. Stop questioning, stop, whatever, and just do it. Hope, it says, is you don't have to fit the mold. God created you. It doesn't matter what these people think of you. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Not even a little bit. The only thing that matters is your relationship with God. And find that. That's the whole reason you're on this planet. Find God and figure it out with Him. And I can't tell you how to do that. Nobody can. You got to do it. Now, people can kind of guide you. But yeah, I think it's what the world's really about. Get yourself figured out. Figure out how to rectify that with God. And justify yourself, get yourself justified with God and then sanctified with God. And if you don't understand those terms, look them up. YouTube can help you with that. Because you told me to. It's funny because I actually did watch a bunch of these. And I think that was Jason's answer. You told me to. Okay, cool. Or no, he said God made me. I liked that one. So the devil made me do it, God made me do it. Yeah, and maybe that's it. I'm trying to do more stuff God tells me to do and less stuff the devil tells me to do these days. God tells me to do hard stuff. God, devil stuff is easy. It's easy to fall down. Gravity will help you. It's great. Getting up is harder, but it's more rewarding. I hope that somebody who is maybe a little bit different sees it, and somebody who maybe that's the only way they'll get talked to or whatever. And there were things like that for me in my life, like the story I told earlier, stop and fix the bridge.